Chapter 1: The Family Gathering. Aaron Matthews adjusted his tie, taking a deep breath before stepping into the lavish dining room of the Matthews estate. The evening air was thick with a sense of tension, even as the room buzzed with polite conversation. His wife, Na, sat across from him, her smile as practiced as always, though tonight it grated on him. At the head of the table, Aaron's father, Roy Matthews, cleared his throat. Instantly, the room quieted, as his presence alone commanded respect. Aaron studied his father, feeling a strange mix of admiration and resentment. He had learned everything from Roy, the art of control, the skill of manipulation, but this announcement would change everything. "I have something to share," Roy said, his deep voice carrying effortlessly across the table. "After much deliberation and consultation with our legal team, I've made my decision about the future of the Matthews estate." Aaron's fingers gripped his glass tightly, betraying the hint of unease he tried so hard to mask. He had spent years building his own silent empire, far more lucrative than the Matthews estate. But the principle of it all, this legacy, meant something to him. "The entirety of the estate will go to Na," Roy declared. The words hung in the air like a blow. Aaron's eyes moved to Na, observing her reaction. Her face was a perfect mask of humility, though he knew better than to believe it. It was all an act, a well-rehearsed performance. "She understands our legacy better than you ever did, Aaron," Roy continued, his words laced with the weight of years of unspoken disappointment. Aaron's mother, Bernadette, added with a smile, "It's for the best, dear." Dinner continued in silence for a moment as Aaron observed the subtle glances exchanged between Na and Glenn McIntosh, a family friend seated near the end of the table. Glenn had become a frequent visitor in recent months, always appearing eager to offer Roy his business advice. Aaron's eyes narrowed. There was something off about the man, something he couldn't put his finger on, until now. After the meal, Aaron found Na alone in the library, scrolling through her phone. Her back was turned, but she sensed his presence before he spoke. "Quite the act at dinner, wasn't it?" Aaron's voice was calm, but the edge in it was unmistakable. "How long have you been working on this?" Na turned around, her phone slipping into her pocket. "You never cared about this family, Aaron. You were always too busy with your hidden business, your secrets. You think no one noticed? I'm trying to protect them from you." A bitter laugh escaped Aaron's lips. "You and Glenn? How long has this been going on?" Her expression faltered for the briefest moment. "Glenn is just an old family friend. Nothing more." Aaron's eyes were cold as he turned to leave. "Enjoy your victory, Na, but it won't last." Later that night, in the quiet solitude of his home office, Aaron opened his encrypted email account. A forwarded message from Na caught his attention. Subject: estate plans. "Everything went according to plan," the message read. "Once the estate is officially transferred, we'll start selling off the non-essential properties. Vacation homes, commercial buildings will get a premium price for the core estate, around $50 million. That'll be enough to disappear and live comfortably." The response was chilling. Subject: re-estate plans. "Brilliant work, love." He never saw it coming. He's too distracted with his own schemes to notice ours. Once the transfer is finalized, we'll liquidate everything. A beach in the Maldives and no more pretending. Aaron's lips curled into a cold smile. He'd spent years learning the value of patience and strategy. The time had come for him to strike. Grabbing his phone, he dialed Derek's number. "Clear your schedule tomorrow. We need to talk." Chapter 2: The Unraveling. Na Ortega paced her private study, the weight of her conversation with Glenn hanging in the air. Glenn's voice echoed in her mind as she prepared for what came next. "The documents are perfect," he had assured her. "Even the best forensic experts won't be able to trace them back to us. Once we present them to the board, Aaron's reputation will be in tatters." She ran a finger over the manila envelope containing the fabricated evidence. "Fake bank statements, transfer records, offshore account details, all expertly created to look real. "You're sure it can't be traced back to us?" she asked, her voice laced with the slightest edge of doubt. "Positive," Glenn replied confidently. "The trail leads to dead ends and defunct companies. By the time anyone catches on, we'll be long gone." Na smirked as she remembered the cold fury in Aaron's eyes when he confronted her earlier. He had always underestimated her, thinking her little more than a pawn in his game. But Na had spent years studying him, his methods, his weaknesses. Now it was her turn. A notification lit up her phone screen. She glanced at it, her expression hardening. "I've got to go. Aaron's calling a meeting with the lawyers tomorrow." "Be careful," Glenn warned. "He's planning something." Na nodded. "Let him. We've already won." Meanwhile, Aaron sat in a dimly lit booth at a local restaurant facing Derek Ayla. They had known each other for years, and while Aaron had forged his empire through ruthless real estate deals, Derek had channeled his intelligence into law. Together, they had become a formidable pair. Derek slid a thick folder across the table. "You were right about Glenn. His past is quite interesting." Aaron opened the folder, skimming through the documents. "Tell me everything." 3 years ago, he was involved in a land development project in Arizona. The property owners refused to sell, and 2 weeks later, their properties mysteriously burned down. Traces of accelerant were found, but the case was dropped. The same pattern shows up in Texas, Nevada, and New Mexico with different names, but always leading back to Glenn. "Enough to pin on him?" Aaron asked. "Not yet, but I'm working on it. I have contacts in those areas, and I'll make sure the case is airtight." Aaron leaned back, a cold smile on his face. "Let them move against me. They'll make mistakes. They think they've won, but that will only make them careless." Derek paused before speaking again. "My sources say they're planning to accuse you of financial fraud. It's going to get ugly." Aaron's voice was calm, but filled with unwavering confidence. "Let them try. They won't find anything. Every transaction, every deal, well documented, perfectly legal. They have nothing." Both Aaron and Na were playing their hands carefully, but the game was far from over. Aaron knew one thing for sure. Na and Glenn's victory would be short-lived. He had waited too long for this moment, and now it was his turn to take back everything they had stolen. The following evening, Aaron found himself at a charity gala hosted by the city's Natural History Museum. Moving through the crowd of society's elite, he played his role as the dutiful son, all the while keeping a watchful eye on the subtle interactions between Na and Glenn. Across the room, a fleeting touch of hands, a glance that lingered too long. Those small gestures may have seemed insignificant to others, but to Aaron's trained eye, they screamed of an affair. They thought they were being discreet, but they were as obvious as shouting. As Aaron scanned the room, his gaze met that of a woman in a midnight blue dress, her sharp eyes studying him. He recognized her instantly. Meredith Carey, the investigative journalist renowned for uncovering corruption among the city's powerful. "I don't know what you mean," Aaron responded smoothly, masking his growing curiosity. Meredith took a sip of her champagne. "I've been observing them all night. The way they communicate without words, how they maintain a careful distance, except for those brief, accidental touches. I'm wondering why you haven't exposed them yet." Aaron's mind sharpened. "Perhaps I'm waiting for the right moment, or maybe I'm planning something more elaborate." She handed him her business card. "I've been digging into Glenn McIntosh for months. His real estate dealings have left a trail of destroyed lives and suspicious accidents. If you're interested, let's compare notes." Before Aaron could respond, Na appeared at his side, her smile flawless and her tone pleasant. But there was something in her eyes, sharp, calculated. "Darling, the Hendersons were asking about you. Shall we?" Aaron excused himself, noting how Meredith watched their departure with keen interest. Another piece on the chessboard, he thought. Later that week, Nina cornered him in his home office. She dropped a folder onto his desk, radiating confidence. I thought you should see these before they go public. Aaron opened the folder and studied the forged documents inside. Bank statements showing systematic theft, emails discussing money laundering, all expertly fabricated. He closed the folder with admiration. Impressive. How long did it take to create these? Nina's composure faltered slightly. They're not forged. They're proof of your crimes. The tension in the air thickened. The board will receive copies tomorrow, unless you agree to step aside, she continued. No fight over the estate. No interference with my decisions moving forward. Aaron rose from his chair and slowly circled his desk, standing face to face with her. And if I refuse, I'll destroy everything you've built, she replied, her voice unwavering. Your reputation, your business relationships, your standing in society, all of it will be gone. Aaron regarded her silently, his admiration for her conviction showing in his eyes. Very well. I'll need 24 hours to get my affairs in order. After she left, Aaron made a series of calls. First, to Sam Pugh, the private investigator who had helped him bury evidence of his more aggressive business tactics over the years. Then to Derek to set plans in motion. Finally, he called Meredith Carey. Miss Carey, about that conversation we had at the gala, Aaron said. I think it's time for a proper discussion about Glenn McIntosh's business dealings. The game was entering its next phase. A few days later, Sam Pugh entered Glenn McIntosh's office, building disguised as a maintenance worker. He'd spent 3 weeks studying the security patterns, learning which guards were diligent and which ones barely glanced at ID badges. His target today, Glenn's private office on the 14th floor. The lock gave way in seconds to Sam's specialized tools. Inside, he moved with practiced efficiency, placing microscopic cameras and strategically connecting his tablet to Glenn's computer. Sam's phone buzzed with a message from Aaron. Status. Everything's in place, Sam replied. We'll have eyes and ears by tonight. Aaron's instructions were clear. Glenn had been involved in too many suspicious real estate deals and his connections to the Riverton Syndicate, a group specializing in laundering money through real estate, had caught Aaron's attention. Meanwhile, Casey Vogel sat in her car outside Nina's favorite cafe, her mind racing. She hadn't spoken to her brother Aaron in months, not since their bitter argument over his business practices. But what she had overheard the day before in the estate's garden room had changed everything. Na's voice had carried clearly through the window, speaking of a transfer that was about to happen. Once the transfer is complete, we'll need to move fast, Na had said. Glenn's buyers are getting impatient. The syndicate doesn't like to wait. Glenn's voice had followed, but the payoff will be worth it. The estate will be carved up and sold before anyone realizes what's happening. Casey had slipped away unnoticed, her mind racing. Despite their differences, she couldn't let Na destroy her family's legacy. After a brief conversation with Aaron, Casey realized the magnitude of what was happening. They're working with real criminals, she warned. Real ones. Aaron studied her, his expression unreadable. Thank you for telling me, he said. It wasn't easy for you to come here. What are you going to do now? Casey's eyes shifted to one of the screens in Aaron's office. What's next? Aaron's voice was steady. Watch. On the screen, Glenn was reviewing the property deal that was about to be finalized. This is perfect, Glenn said, speaking to someone on the phone. The environmental issues are driving away other buyers. We can acquire it for pennies on the dollar. Aaron smiled coldly. They never considered why the property became available so suddenly, or why the environmental concerns weren't publicized sooner. It's a trap. As the days passed, Glenn rushed to close the deal, believing he had everything in place. But Aaron had set his plan in motion. The federal agents were ready. The morning of the deal, as Glenn signed the final papers, federal agents swarmed the property, arresting members of the Riverton Syndicate. Glenn barely escaped, his car speeding away as the agents closed in. Aaron watched from his office, satisfaction evident on his face. "This is just the beginning," Aaron murmured, his gaze cold. "They'll realize soon enough just how badly they've miscalculated." Breaking news update. The financial world was rocked today as rumors surfaced about Glenn McIntosh's alleged ties to organized crime. Speculation exploded across social media platforms, intensifying the mystery surrounding his dealings. Meanwhile, Nina's frantic attempts to contact Glenn became increasingly desperate as the hours passed, each call heading straight to voicemail. Inside the house, Aaron kept a watchful eye on the situation, monitoring Nina's every movement through an upgraded security system he had installed months earlier. As more incriminating details emerged, Nina's calm demeanor began to unravel, revealing her panic as her carefully crafted plans began to collapse under pressure. The phone rang, and Aaron answered it without hesitation. It was Roy Matthews' assistant, alerting him that his father was on the line. "Have you seen the news?" Roy's voice crackled with concern. "They're saying Glenn McIntosh is involved in criminal activities, laundering money through real estate. What's going on?" "I'm watching it now," Aaron replied calmly, his voice betraying nothing. "Shocking, yes. But Nina's not answering her phone. She was the one who pushed us to trust Glenn with the investments." Roy paused, doubt creeping into his voice. "I'm sure Nina will explain. But this is bad. We might be exposed." "Don't worry," Aaron reassured him. "She'll find a way to explain, and we'll support her. Let's keep calm for now." Aaron turned to Casey, who was working nearby. "Thanks for everything." "You've been invaluable," he said, though his expression was unreadable. Casey nodded, studying her brother's face carefully. She could see through the calm facade, sensing the hurt and betrayal lurking beneath. "They tried to take everything from you," she said quietly, "but they failed." Aaron's voice hardened with certainty. Now they'll learn what failure costs. As night descended upon the city, Aaron stood at his office window, watching the city lights flicker to life in the distance. His screens continued to track every detail of the unfolding drama. News outlets reported on the federal investigation, while financial analysts speculated on the impact of Glenn's alleged criminal activities. Social media buzzed with wild theories and accusations. Nina had left the house in a rush, driving erratically toward a small executive airport where Glenn kept a private plane. But Aaron was already ahead of her. Anonymous tips to aviation authorities about possible drug trafficking had grounded all private flights. Sam's voice came through the secure line. "Glenn's been spotted at the Marina Heights Hotel. Do you want us to maintain surveillance?" "Keep your distance," Aaron instructed. "Let him think he's found safety. Tomorrow we move to Phase 2. Meanwhile, Casey was monitoring family lawyers' urgent calls regarding Nina's involvement with Glenn. They were deeply concerned. "The timing couldn't be more perfect," Aaron murmured, his expression hardening. "By tomorrow, Nina will realize that losing the estate is the least of her concerns." Derek, who had been liaising with federal contacts, added, "The syndicate isn't happy with Glenn. They're asking about his recent activities. They don't like the attention he's bringing." "Make sure the right people know about this," Aaron ordered. "Let them see exactly how much money they've lost and who's responsible." Everything was falling into place. Glenn was isolated, his criminal ties exposed. Nina's hold on the family was slipping away. But Aaron wasn't ready to celebrate just yet. He knew from years of business dealings that the real challenge came from wounded enemies. Later that night, as the team regrouped, Aaron remained vigilant. Surveillance showed Nina had returned home, her earlier panic replaced by a steely determination. She was planning something, desperate but dangerous. "Increase the surveillance," Aaron ordered, his voice cold. "I want to know everyone she contacts and every move she makes." "She's dangerous when cornered," Casey observed quietly. Aaron's slight smile was filled with cold confidence. The difference is I plan for every contingency. With the first phase of his plan a resounding success, Aaron knew the battle was far from over. Glenn's reputation was shattered, and Nina's power over the family was weakening. But he understood that wounded opponents could be the most dangerous. The next few days would be crucial. Glenn and Nina would surely look for any way to salvage their crumbling empire. But Aaron was ready for whatever they might try. Casey's voice cut through his thoughts. "Your father's estate." Aaron looked up from his screens. "This stopped being about the estate the moment they decided to betray me," he said, his eyes hardening. "Now it's about justice." "Justice?" Casey repeated, her tone thoughtful. Aaron smiled coldly. "Yes, and I've become very good at delivering it." As the first phase of his revenge drew to a close, Aaron knew that this was just the beginning. His enemies would soon realize they were caught in a web they couldn't escape from. Chapter 4: Burning Bridges. At 3 a.m., Meredith Carr's phone buzzed. A trusted financial news source had sent her an urgent text. "Check your email. Breaking story about Glenn McIntosh." Meredith opened her laptop, scanning the draft article sent by her colleague. The pieces Aaron had provided aligned perfectly with her ongoing investigation into Glenn. Bank records linked him to known criminals. Property deeds tied him to shady development projects, and witnesses had come forward with accounts of intimidation and threats. "Run it," Meredith typed back. "I'll confirm the additional details by sunrise." As the article broke across financial networks, Glenn McIntosh's face appeared on screens around the city, accompanied by headlines detailing his alleged connections to organized crime. Aaron, observing the coverage from his downtown office, felt a cold satisfaction. Derek reported in real time, Glenn's major investors are pulling out. His company's stock is tanking. The board's calling an emergency meeting. Aaron nodded, picking up his phone as it vibrated. Roy Mathai was on the line. "Aaron, this news about Glenn, Nina's insisting it's all fabricated. She says someone's framing him. The evidence seems pretty damning." "I'll review it," Aaron said coolly. "We should also take a look at the family's exposure to his ventures." Roy agreed, but the emergency meeting never took place. Within hours, Nina launched her counterattack. Photos began circulating on major news sites, showing Aaron with known criminals. The images were expertly staged. Glenn's final trump card. Meredith called Aaron, urgency in her voice. "These photos, they're well crafted, but they won't hold up. Give me 2 hours." "You've got 1, Aaron replied, his tone clipped. "Phase 2, Aaron instructed Derek, who quickly mobilized the team. Within minutes, press releases went out detailing Aaron's work in affordable housing, showing his dedication to renovating rundown properties and providing below-market rents for struggling families. Community leaders were prepped in advance, praising his generosity. The narrative shifted. Aaron Mathai, secret philanthropist, versus Glenn McIntosh, exposed criminal. Nina watched in disbelief as her plans crumbled. She called Glenn again, her hands trembling. "The number you are trying to reach is no longer in service." As the device flew across the room, Na's patience finally snapped. Her usually composed exterior crumbled. The meticulously forged documents that were supposed to ruin Aaron, now lying in tatters. Her plan had backfired. Glenn was unreachable, their accounts locked, and reporters crowded at her gates like vultures. A knock on the door startled her. Casey stood in the doorway, her face unreadable. "The lawyers need all documents related to the foundation's investments," she said flatly. "Father's orders." Na's eyes narrowed. "You've been helping him, haven't you? You tried to destroy my brother." There was a venom in her voice that lacked the usual warmth she reserved for Casey. Casey didn't flinch. "Did you really think we wouldn't fight back?" she asked, stepping into the room. "Get out of my study." Casey moved with surprising speed, reaching for the leather-bound ledger on Na's desk. "I'll take this." Na lunged, but Casey was already out of reach, her footsteps echoing down the hall. The ledger contained everything: dates, account numbers, and illegal transactions Glenn and Na had carefully hidden. Glenn's paranoia about leaving digital traces led him to keep physical records, something that would now be his downfall. Aaron studied the ledger, satisfaction growing with each page he turned. "This is everything we need," Derek confirmed, pointing to the offshore accounts and payments to the syndicate. "The foundation transfers are all here." Aaron carefully closed the book. "Make copies," he ordered. "Then set up a meeting with Na. We need to finish this." The confrontation took place in the estate's grand library. Na entered, her head high, but Aaron noticed the signs of strain: smudged makeup, shaky hands quickly hidden in her pockets. She was cracking. "The choice is simple," Aaron said coldly, placing the ledger between them. "Leave town tonight, disappear, or I hand this over to the authorities." Na laughed, but it was laced with hysteria. "You think I'll run after everything I've built? After all this time?" Her eyes were wild. "I've created more in 5 years than you did in 20. You won't break me." Aaron's voice was like ice. "You've built nothing. You wormed your way into my family, manipulated my parents, betrayed my trust. And for what? Money? You'll never have the power you think you deserve." "I've made the name Matthews mean something again," she spat back. Aaron's gaze narrowed, his presence filling the room like a storm. "You destroyed everything you touched, and now you'll pay for it." Na's smile twisted into something vicious. "I'm not finished yet. Not even close." With that, she spun on her heel and strode out of the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Aaron watched her go, then pulled out his phone. "Activate everything," he told Derek. "The war's just begun." 3 days later, the first blow came. Aaron's security team detected multiple attempts to breach his company's servers. Amateur work, easily deflected by the systems he'd put in place months ago. They'd taken the bait. His head of cybersecurity reported the breach, adding, "They're downloading the decoy files now." Aaron smirked, remembering how carefully they had crafted those files. False contracts, fake bank statements, fabricated evidence, all designed to send Na and Glenn down the wrong path. But the real attack came a few days after. Meredith, a reporter who had been investigating Glenn and Na's dealings, vanished. Her editor reported her missing after not hearing from her for 24 hours. Security footage showed 2 men forcing her into a van. Aaron's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "We have her. You have 6 hours." In the privacy of his office, Aaron gathered his team. Derek pulled up blueprints of abandoned properties linked to Glenn. Sam Pugh reported on movement in the Marina District warehouse, where Glenn's men had been spotted moving equipment just the day before. The location was heavily guarded, but Aaron's team had the advantage. "Sam, take your team in through the roof. Derek, you coordinate from the van. I'll handle the distraction at the front entrance." Derek hesitated. "This is exactly what they want, Aaron. They're trying to draw you out." Aaron's eyes were steely. "No, this is what I want. Glenn's desperate. He'll make a mistake. This ends tonight." The operation began with perfect precision. Sam's team had already infiltrated the roof as Aaron's car neared the warehouse. His guards were tense as he stepped out, hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "I have what you want. Take me to Glenn." Inside, Meredith was tied to a chair, bruised but conscious. Glenn emerged from the shadows, haggard and shaking. "Give me the evidence." "Then I'll release her," he demanded, his voice edged with desperation. Aaron smiled coldly. "Actually, I'm in a position to negotiate now." At that signal, the skylight shattered as Sam's team descended swiftly, weapons drawn. 2 guards were down before they could react, and the third was quickly neutralized. Glenn tried to run, but was blocked by Aaron's presence. "It's over," Aaron said quietly. Glenn's laugh was hollow and manic. You think this changes anything? Na's already gone to your parents. She's shown them everything. The recordings, the evidence. She's made sure they know the truth. Aaron wasn't fazed. Let him go, he ordered as Sam's team moved in to apprehend Glenn. He won't get far. After the medics check Meredith, we'll handle him. Just as the team moved to leave, Aaron's phone buzzed again. It was Casey. Nina's here. She's showing Father everything, and he's actually listening. Aaron's heart sank, but his voice was calm. Stay with them. I'll be there in 10. By the time Aaron arrived at the estate, the confrontation was already in full swing. His father, Roy Matthews, sat at his desk, his face a picture of disbelief as Na waved a phone in front of him. Don't you see? He's been manipulating everything. The media, the documents. Everything you've seen is a lie. But Aaron entered the room, his presence overpowering. She's lying, he said simply. Na's face went pale. No. Glenn, he kept a journal. The proof is in there. Aaron didn't flinch. Father, check your phone. I just sent you something interesting. As Roy started reading, his face turned ashen. This can't be real. It is, Aaron said calmly. Everything in that journal can be verified. Bank records, dates, witnesses. Glenn was thorough. Na's face twisted into an ugly snarl. You're just like him. A manipulator. A monster. No, Aaron said, his voice cutting through her accusations. I'm exactly what you and Glenn created. You taught me that trust is weakness. That family doesn't matter. Now you'll see just how well I learned those lessons. Roy stood, his authority returning. Nina, it's over. I'll have the lawyers contact you about dissolving your connection to the estate. It's time for you to leave. As security escorted Na out, Aaron watched from the window. His phone buzzed again. It was Sam. Glenn's car's been spotted. He's heading for the airport. Do you want us to intercept? Aaron paused, then typed his response. Let him run. He's got nowhere to go. All his accounts are frozen, his passport's flagged. He'll be trapped. Casey appeared at his side. It's not over, is it? Aaron shook his head, a cold smile on his lips. No, but the next phase will be very interesting. The lawsuit came the next morning. At exactly 9 a.m., Nina's lawyers had worked through the night, crafting a masterpiece of lies, fraud, conspiracy, criminal enterprise, all spread across 50 pages. They demanded a full audit of his operations and access to all communication records for the past 5 years. Derek handed Aaron the papers. She's hoping to find something real among all the lies. Aaron set the papers aside with a calm smile. Let her dig. We've prepared for this moment. The media swarmed like hungry wolves, but Aaron remained focused. Every document, every call, every piece of evidence had been placed for this very moment. Na thought she was forcing his hand, but in reality, she was playing the exact role Aaron had orchestrated for her. Let the trial begin. Weeks later, Nina arrived at the courthouse, her designer clothes signaling confidence for the waiting cameras. Her legal team trailed behind her, carrying boxes of evidence, ready to unveil Aaron's supposed crimes. Aaron, in his immaculate suit, greeted reporters with a polite nod but remained silent. His calm exterior hid a keen awareness, watching Nina closely. He noticed the slight tremor in her hands, the tension in her eyes. She was starting to crack. In the courtroom, Nina's lawyers began with a dramatic presentation. Emails hinting at conspiracy, phone records suggesting shady dealings, financial documents pointing toward fraud. Each piece of evidence seemed damning. Aaron's team, however, was ready. They dismantled every claim, exposing the fabricated nature of each piece of evidence through expert testimony and meticulous forensic analysis. But the true blow came during Nina's cross-examination. Mrs. Matthews, Aaron's lead attorney, began, "Could you explain the series of transfers from the family foundation to offshore accounts?" Nina's composure faltered. Those were legitimate charitable donations, she stammered. Mrs. Matthews held up Glenn's ledger, showing detailed records that contradicted Nina's claims. But according to Mr. McIntosh's records, it suggests otherwise. Hour after hour, the questioning continued. Nina's testimony began to unravel. Her lies, once so carefully constructed, fell apart under the relentless scrutiny. In the gallery, Roy and Bernadette sat, watching their daughter-in-law's downfall with growing horror. The woman they had trusted, the one they had chosen over their own son, was now revealed to be a calculating manipulator. The final blow came when Glenn was brought into the courtroom in handcuffs. He had been caught attempting to flee the country with false documents and had agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. Glenn's testimony crushed what was left of Nina's credibility. He detailed the entire scheme, the manipulation of the family, plans to sell off the estate, and connections to organized crime. Nina sat rigid in her chair, her face a mask of fury and despair as Glenn spoke. When he finished, she stood abruptly. "This is all lies," she shouted. "Aaron orchestrated everything. He's the real criminal." The judge's voice snapped through the room. "Control yourself, or you'll be held in contempt." After the session, Roy and Bernadette approached Aaron outside the courtroom. "Son," Roy said, his voice heavy with regret, "we were wrong about everything. We should have trusted you." Tears welled in Bernadette's eyes as she added, "We're so sorry, Aaron." Aaron accepted their apologies with a gracious nod, playing the role of the forgiving son perfectly. Inside, however, he felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Their recognition of their mistake was merely another piece in his larger plan. Later that evening, Aaron found Nina waiting for him at their home. She stood in his study, holding a glass of wine, her hand trembling. "Can I pack your things?" Aaron asked mildly. Nina's voice was raw. "When did you start planning this? How long have you been orchestrating our destruction?" Aaron moved to his desk, pressing a button that activated hidden recordings. "The moment you and Glenn decided to betray me," he replied coolly. "I gave you both everything: trust, loyalty, love. You taught me those were weaknesses to be exploited." Her eyes flared with fury. "So this is your revenge? Destroying us in court? Turning my life into a public spectacle?" "No," Aaron said, his voice devoid of emotion. "This is justice. You tried to take everything from me. Now you'll spend the rest of your life with nothing. No money, no power, no respect. Just the knowledge that you brought this on yourself." "I'll fight you." Nina's eyes blazed with desperate defiance. "You've already lost," Aaron replied, his voice final. He gestured to the door. "Security will escort you out. Consider this your final warning. Leave with whatever dignity you have left, or I'll make sure you leave in handcuffs." For a moment, Nina's hand tightened around the wine glass. Aaron thought she might throw it at him. Instead, she set it down with deliberate care. "You think you've won," she whispered, her voice laced with venom. "But you've become exactly what you claim to hate: a manipulator, a destroyer." "No," Aaron responded, his voice cold and final. "I've become what I needed to be to deliver justice. The difference between us, Nina, is that you destroyed for greed. I destroyed to right wrongs." Two security guards appeared in the doorway. Nina straightened, gathering the remnants of her dignity around her like armor. "This isn't over," she spat. "Actually, it is," Aaron replied, turning his back to her. "Goodbye, Nina." The sound of her heels clicking down the hallway faded, followed by the distant thud of the front door. Aaron waited until his security team confirmed she had left before allowing himself a moment of reflection. His phone buzzed with a message from Derek. "Glenn's attorney is pushing for a plea deal. The DA wants your input." Aaron typed back firmly, "No deals. He faces everything he's done." Another message came in, this one from Casey. "Father's calling a family meeting tomorrow. Said it's about making things right." Aaron smiled coldly. Everything was falling into place exactly as he'd planned. Nina's desperate attempts to turn his parents against him had backfired spectacularly, pushing them to finally see the truth about her manipulation. In his study, Aaron reviewed the security footage of Nina getting into her car. Her usual grace was gone, replaced by barely controlled fury. She had lost everything: her position in society, her influence over his family, and the carefully constructed facade of respectability. But Aaron knew better than to underestimate her. Even now, she would likely try something desperate. "Sir," came the voice of his head of security over the intercom. "Mrs. Matthews is headed toward the Marina District. Do you want us to maintain surveillance?" "Keep your distance," Aaron instructed. "She'll try something soon. I want to know exactly what it is." The next morning, Roy Matthews stood before the assembled family in the estate's main drawing room. Bernadette sat beside him, her face worn by the strain of recent revelations. "What happened to this family was my fault," Roy began, his voice heavy with regret. "I let an outsider turn me against my own son." Chapter 7: The Fall of Nina Ortega. Aaron sat silently, watching his father's unusual display of humility. Beside him, Casey squeezed his hand, a brief gesture of solidarity between siblings who had weathered the storm together. "The estate will be returned to its rightful heir," Roy said, his voice heavy with emotion. "You've proven yourself, not just capable, but worthy. More than that, you've shown wisdom I failed to recognize." "Thank you, Father," Aaron replied simply, playing his part perfectly, the prodigal son, gracious in victory. But as his family embraced him, attempting to rebuild their fractured bonds, Aaron's mind was elsewhere. Na was still free, still dangerous. Glenn's criminal connections remained a threat. His phone vibrated, and Sam Pugh's number flashed on the screen. "Sir, movement at the Marina warehouse. Nina's meeting with some of Glenn's old associates." "They're planning something," Sam's voice crackled. "Good," Aaron responded, his tone cool. "Let them plan. Let them think they still have cards to play." He ended the call, returning his focus to his family's attempts at reconciliation. They believed this was the end, that justice had been served, that order had been restored. But Aaron knew better. The final act of this drama had yet to unfold, and he would be the one to orchestrate every moment of it. As night blanketed the city, Aaron stood in his office, watching the lights of Nina's car disappear into the darkness. She was running, but not escaping. Every move she made would only bring her closer to the trap Aaron had set. His estate was his again. His family had seen through Nina's lies, and Glenn was facing the consequences of his crimes. But Aaron had learned the hard way: never celebrate victory until every threat was neutralized. His phone lit up with a final report for the day. Na accessed her emergency accounts. She's starting to move money offshore. Glenn's associates are mobilizing. "Perfect," Aaron typed back. "Everything proceeds as planned." He closed his laptop, satisfaction coursing through him. Let them plot and scheme. Let them think they still had hope. Aaron had prepared for every contingency. Every desperate move they might make had been anticipated. The war wasn't over, but the outcome had already been decided. Na and Glenn had taught him valuable lessons about trust, betrayal, and power. Now they would learn just how thoroughly he had mastered those lessons. As security locked down the estate for the night, Aaron reviewed the files detailing the dwindling resources of his enemies, desperate attempts to salvage something from the wreckage of their schemes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles. But Aaron Mathis was ready. They had created this version of him, ruthless, unforgiving, unstoppable. Now they would face the consequences of their creation. The end of Act 2 approached, not with a bang, but with the quiet certainty of inevitable destruction. The pieces were set, the trap ready to spring. All that remained was to watch his enemies make their final fatal mistakes. Chapter 8: The Trial. The courtroom fell silent as the jury foreman stood. Nina Ortega's hands gripped the edge of the defense table, her knuckles white against the polished wood. The gallery, packed with reporters, leaned forward in anticipation. On the charge of conspiracy in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. Nina's face remained frozen in a mask of defiance. On the charge of fraud, we find the defendant guilty. A slight tremor ran through her shoulders, but she did not break her composure. On the charge of perjury, we find the defendant guilty. Aaron stood near the prosecution table, his expression betraying none of the satisfaction that surged within him. Beside him, Derek made notes on his tablet, documenting the verdicts for their records. The judge's voice cut through the murmurs. "Mrs. Ortega Matthews, please rise for sentencing." Nina stood, her designer's suit failing to conceal how much weight she had lost during the trial. Her eyes locked onto Aaron's, burning with hatred. "This court has reviewed the evidence presented, the severity of your crimes, and your complete lack of remorse," the judge began. "Your actions have shown a calculated pattern of deception, manipulation, and criminal behavior that has destroyed lives and betrayed sacred trusts." He paused, reviewing his notes. "Additionally, your attempts to obstruct justice and the false accusations against others demonstrate that you remain a threat to society." Nina's attorney began to speak, but the judge silenced him with a sharp gesture. "Therefore, it is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." The gallery erupted into gasps and furious scribbling. Nina swayed but remained standing, her defiance unbroken. In the adjoining courtroom, Glenn McIntosh's sentencing was already underway. His cooperation had earned him no mercy. His extensive criminal history, combined with the new charges, guaranteed that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Aaron left the courthouse without speaking to reporters. In the car, Derek reviewed their next steps. "The estate transfer paperwork is ready," Derek reported. "The renovation plan for the community center has been approved. The PR team is prepared to announce the initiative." Aaron studied the message on his phone, a confirmation that Nina had been processed into the federal detention center, and the other matter. The foundation's funds had been recovered, and the offshore accounts were being liquidated. Nina and Glenn's victims would be compensated fully. "Schedule a meeting with the architectural team," Aaron said. "I want the community center operational within 6 months." The Matthews estate underwent a transformation in the weeks that followed. The formal gardens gave way to accessible green spaces, and the ballroom became a multi-purpose community hall. The library expanded to include educational resources for local students. Casey joined Aaron in overseeing the renovations, their shared vision beginning to heal old wounds between them. "You were right," she said one afternoon, reviewing construction plans, "about everything." "Nah, Glenn, all of it. They underestimated both of us," Aaron replied. "A mistake they'll have years in prison to reflect on." The maximum security women's facility rose from the desert like a monument to lost freedom. Aaron passed through multiple security checkpoints, his movements tracked by cameras and armed guards. Na waited in the visitation room, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, her designer clothes replaced by an institutional ID badge. Her eyes narrowed as Aaron sat across from her. "Come to gloat," she sneered. Aaron met her gaze steadily. "No, I've come to watch you face the consequences of your actions." A faint voice echoed through the silence, a rasp born of long disuse. "You thought you could take everything from me," it said, the tone void of emotion. "Instead, you gave me the power to become unstoppable. You didn't destroy my life. You forced me to rebuild it into something stronger." Aaron stood still, watching her unmoved. "You destroyed your own life," he responded coldly, his gaze unwavering. "I simply made you face the consequences." With that, he turned to leave, but paused at the door. Goodbye. Her scream of fury followed him, but he didn't flinch. Some stories had to end with finality. Chapter 8: A New Dawn. The grand opening of the Maddie's Community Center drew a crowd of excited locals. Aaron stood in the background, observing. Families roamed through the new spaces, children discovered the playground, and seniors found their spots in the activity rooms. Meredith Carey, clipboard in hand, approached him. "Quite the transformation," she remarked, looking around at the once decrepit estate, now bustling with life. Aaron glanced at her, his eyes calculating. "Not just the estate," he replied, his voice low but steady, "but also myself." Meredith smiled knowingly. "Your PR team must be thrilled. A ruthless businessman turns his family's property into a community hub? The headlines practically write themselves." "You're not here for a story, Meredith," Aaron said, his tone even. Her smile deepened, revealing the understanding that had blossomed between them since the ordeal. "No, I'm not." Their relationship had grown from shared experiences, rooted in trust and mutual respect. Meredith's sharp mind balanced Aaron's strategic brilliance. Together, they had become an unshakable team. The formal transfer of the estate had taken place in Roy's study, where Aaron signed the final documents. His father, placing a hand on Aaron's shoulder, spoke softly. "You've transformed our legacy. You've made it something we never imagined." "I learned a lot the hard way," Aaron responded. "Power means nothing if it's not backed by purpose." Bernadette, eyes wet with emotion, dabbed at her face with a handkerchief. "We were so wrong about you, about everything." Aaron's gaze softened, but he remained firm. "The past is settled. Now we focus on the future." That future began to take shape in unexpected ways. The Maddie's Community Center became a model for other urban renewal projects, while Aaron's once cutthroat business empire shifted towards more ethical ventures. Affordable housing and urban development replaced the ruthless acquisition strategies of his past. "You've changed," Casey remarked one evening as Aaron pored over a new proposal. Aaron looked up, a flicker of something in his eyes. "I've evolved. The past has taught me lessons about power, justice, responsibility, and revenge." "You mean revenge wasn't enough?" Casey asked, her voice laced with curiosity. Aaron's lips curled into a small, rueful smile. "Revenge is necessary, but it's not the end goal. True victory comes from building something better from the wreckage." The media hailed Aaron's transformation, but few saw the quiet steel beneath his newfound philanthropy. His business acumen remained razor-sharp, and those who crossed him still found themselves facing the full force of his strategy. One night, as Aaron reviewed business plans in his office, a member of his security team arrived with a letter. Inside, a single sheet of paper held a simple message. "This isn't over." Aaron's lips curled into a cold smile as he stored the note in his safe. "Let them come," he muttered. He had learned to deal with threats. This was no different. Later, Meredith found him standing on the estate's terrace, looking out over the city lights. "Another threat?" she asked. Aaron nodded, drawing her closer. "Another opportunity." Meredith's eyes met his, understanding the unspoken truth. "They don't know, do they? You're not the same man they're after." Aaron's smile deepened. "No, I'm much more dangerous now." Chapter 9: The Final Move. The investigation into the threat quickly revealed connections to the remnants of the old syndicate. Sam Pugh, Aaron's head of surveillance, reported unusual movements from former associates of Glenn's crew. Derek's legal sources uncovered whispers of revenge plots. "It's what's left of Glenn's gang," Sam reported during a secure briefing. "They're trying to pick up where he left off." Aaron studied the photos, his expression cool. "They think they can take back what they lost." He paused, then shook his head. "Let them. We'll be ready when they strike." The trap was set. Aaron leaked information about a major development project, teasing the potential for easy profits. His team spread rumors of weak security, making it irresistible to the desperate criminals. 3 weeks later, the syndicate moved in, gathering in an abandoned warehouse to strategize. They never realized they were under constant surveillance. "They think they've found an opening," Derek reported, his voice steady. "They're in position." Aaron's eyes never left the screen in front of him. Let them make their move. When the time came, the operation hit with overwhelming force. FBI and SWAT teams raided the warehouse, surrounding it from all angles. Within minutes, the syndicate's leadership was in custody. "Send everything to the prosecutors," Aaron ordered, his voice unwavering. "No plea deals. No mercy." As the sun rose over the city, Aaron stood in his office, reviewing the success of the operation. The syndicate had been dismantled. Its leaders would face long prison sentences. The last serious threat to his empire had been neutralized. Casey entered, coffee in hand, a smile of victory on her face. "Is it finally over?" "This chapter is," Aaron replied, his voice calm. "But there will always be new challenges and new opponents. But now, they'll think twice before crossing us." The transformation continued. The Maddie's Community Center grew, offering more programs and expanding its reach. New developments provided affordable housing while generating solid returns. Aaron's reputation as a businessman who could blend shrewdness with social responsibility spread. The old empire was gone, but a new one had risen from its ashes, stronger, better, and more purposeful than ever. Meredith documented the fall of the syndicate, her article revealing the full extent of their criminal operations without exposing Aaron's role in their downfall. Their relationship had blossomed in the process, founded on deep respect and mutual understanding. One evening, as they shared a quiet moment, Meredith said, "You've won." Aaron's response was thoughtful. "Victory isn't just about winning. It's about making sure you never have to fight the same battle again." The final piece of the puzzle fell into place during a sunset ceremony at the estate. Amidst the newly renovated grounds, Aaron and Meredith exchanged vows before close friends and family. Casey stood as a witness, with her newborn daughter nestled peacefully in Roy's arms. Afterward, at the reception, Aaron took a call from his security team. The last of the syndicate leaders had agreed to a plea deal, securing a life sentence in exchange for revealing details of other criminal enterprises. Upon returning to the celebration, Aaron joined his family on the terrace, the city sprawling below them, its lights twinkling like stars. This was his domain now, not just the businesses and buildings, but the power to shape its future. Casey, cradling her daughter, smiled as the baby reached for her necklace, a gentle reminder of the family legacy. "She's going to learn about the family business," Casey said, a knowing glint in her eyes. "About responsibility," Aaron corrected her, adding, "about using power wisely." Meredith linked her arm with Aaron's, and about not taking betrayal lightly. Aaron's smile, full of warmth yet edged with caution, was a warning and a lesson. That lesson comes naturally in this family. The fireworks began, filling the night sky with brilliant colors. The guests gasped in appreciation as Aaron took in the scene. He had not only achieved victory, but peace. Revenge had been tempered with redemption. The game had ended, and those who had sought to destroy him were no more, their schemes relegated to history. Aaron Matthews stood victorious. His empire was secure, his legacy cemented. His enemies had unknowingly given him a priceless gift. They had pushed him to become stronger, smarter, and more ruthless than they could ever imagine. Now, that strength would serve a higher purpose, protecting everything he had built and those he had chosen to trust. As the fireworks reached their peak, lighting the sky in brilliant splendor, Aaron drew Meredith closer, feeling the presence of Casey beside them, and sensing his parents' quiet pride in the distance. This, he thought, was real victory, not just the destruction of enemies, but the creation of something worthy. From the ashes of their enemies' defeat, the Mathys family had forged a new legacy, one built on power, strength, and unwavering trust. Aaron Mathys, once betrayed and underestimated, had become an unshakable force. His family was restored, his future secure. Let others learn from his story. Let them understand that betrayal carries consequences and that true power belongs to those who wield it justly. Epilogue. 10 years later. A decade had passed since the fall of Na and Glen, and the Mathys empire had expanded beyond recognition. What had started as Aaron's discreet real estate ventures had evolved into a multinational powerhouse specializing in urban development and community renewal. The Mathys estate, now a thriving community center, served as a blueprint for similar projects across 3 continents. At 45, Aaron stood in his penthouse office, reviewing projections for his latest projects. Success had only sharpened his edge, adding a quiet authority to his every action. Derek Ayla, his trusted advisor and head legal counsel, stood beside him. The faint touch of gray at Derek's temples was the only sign of age. "The Shanghai development is on track," Derek reported. "Local authorities are impressed with our community integration programs. As for security concerns, Sam's team has handled them." Aaron nodded. "Good. The triads have kept their distance." Derek smiled. They remember what happened to the last criminal group that crossed Mathys International. Aaron's legacy had been solidified in both business and myth. The destruction of the Riverton Syndicate was now a tale told in hushed tones in criminal circles, though the truth was far more impressive. Only his inner circle knew how Aaron had orchestrated their downfall. A gentle knock interrupted the moment, and Meredith entered, her sharp investigative instincts undimmed by motherhood. "Our daughter," she said with a mix of pride and exasperation, "just hacked her school's grading system." Aaron raised an eyebrow. "To change her grades?" "No," Meredith replied. "She exposed security flaws and submitted a report to the administration. They offered her an internship in their IT department. At just 9 years old, Victoria Mathys already displayed the strategic mind of her father and the relentless pursuit of truth of her mother. She was a force to be reckoned with, and Aaron couldn't have been prouder." Just then, Casey entered with her daughter, Emma, who is now 13 and serving as Victoria's protective cousin. The girls exchanged a conspiratorial look, reminding Aaron of the early days when he and Casey had plotted their enemy's fall. Casey, now the Chief Operations Officer of Mathys International, reminded them, "Board meeting in 10 minutes." Later, at dinner, the extended Mathys family gathered. Roy and Bernadette, now in their 70s, doted on their granddaughters. Even though she had retired from active management, Bernadette remained deeply involved in the charitable side of the family business. As Aaron watched his daughter explain her latest app project to Roy, he couldn't help but feel immense pride. His father's approving gaze met his, a silent acknowledgement of how far the family had come. The Mathys empire, once forged in the fires of betrayal, had grown into something far greater. It was a legacy of power, responsibility, and trust. Later that evening, Aaron and Casey stood in their father's old study. "Remember when we planned Nina's takedown here?" Casey asked, nostalgia coloring her voice. Aaron smiled faintly. "Hard to forget. You risked everything to help me." "And you risked everything to protect our family," Casey replied, gesturing toward the photo on the wall of their family at the 10th anniversary celebration of the community center. "What that risk built," Aaron mused. The Mathys empire had indeed grown into something far more significant than they could have ever imagined, building a legacy. Over time, Aaron had transformed his once powerful empire into a symbol of community progress. What had started with a thirst for revenge and power had evolved into a force for positive change, revitalizing struggling neighborhoods and investing in education and healthcare. The security operations that protected their assets were as sharp and efficient as ever, but now they focused on protecting the vulnerable rather than exerting control. One afternoon, Aaron's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Sam, the head of his surveillance team. The report detailed Nina's latest attempts to reconnect with a former member of the Riverton Syndicate. It seemed that Nina hadn't fully severed her ties with the past. Aaron's eyes darkened as he read through the message. "Still monitoring her?" Casey asked, catching the shift in Aaron's expression. "Always," Aaron replied coldly, his voice carrying the same ruthless determination it had during the days of their revenge plot. Power isn't just about taking control. It's about holding on to it, protecting it. A noise from the family room drew their attention. Victoria was showing Emma the app she had been working on, a software platform for community learning. The laughter that followed felt like a promise, a symbol of everything Aaron had fought for. A better future for his family, grounded in security and purpose. The next morning, Aaron visited one of their affordable housing developments. He was greeted with the respect of people who recognized his efforts, though there was always a quiet tension around him, the shadow of his past. His reputation for leadership was as much about respect as it was about fear. As he sat in his car reviewing project reports, another secure message came through. It was an update on Nina's psychiatric evaluation, which recommended against granting her parole. The report cited her manipulative tendencies and her continued deceitfulness. She wasn't ready for release yet, not by a long shot. "Don't forget about Victoria's presentation today," his driver reminded him, breaking through his thoughts. Aaron smiled. His daughter was presenting a project she developed for the local community center, a learning platform that adjusted to each user's needs. At only 9 years old, she was already showing remarkable intelligence and a deep empathy for others. At the conference later that day, Victoria stood on stage with confidence, explaining the platform to industry leaders and educators. Aaron watched from the wings, reflecting on how different her life was from his own. She was shaping her future in ways that he couldn't have imagined at her age. "She's amazing," Meredith whispered, squeezing his hand. "She is," Aaron agreed softly. "She has all the strength without the scars." That was the goal. Everything Aaron had done, all the pain he had endured, had been to build a future for his children, one free of the mistakes of his past. Later that week, another report on Nina came in. Despite her outward compliance, she was still trying to reconnect with the criminal world. One of her former cellmates had recently been released, and the two had started corresponding. Aaron's team was already on it, preventing any threats from materializing. "Do we need to adjust the surveillance?" Sam asked during a briefing. "No. Let her think she has some freedom. It makes tracking her easier," Aaron answered, already focused on how to manage the situation without giving away their hand. Their security systems had grown more sophisticated. What once was about maintaining control had now shifted into a fine-tuned operation of protection. AI-driven algorithms monitored communication, and behavioral analysis predicted threats before they materialized. During a charity gala at the community center, Aaron watched Victoria and Emma helping younger children with computer tutorials. The sight reassured him. This was what mattered, the next generation, equipped not just with wealth, but with the wisdom to protect what they built. A young developer approached Aaron during the event, nervously thanking him for the mentorship program. "It changed my life," he said. The program, initiated by Victoria, used their family's resources to support students from disadvantaged backgrounds, guiding them into successful careers. Aaron smiled, proud. His daughter had learned what had taken him years to understand. True power was not just in acquisition, but in lifting others up, making them stronger together. That night, Aaron reviewed the footage from Nina's prison surveillance. He noticed a pattern. Her recent behavior coincided with her increased contact with her former cellmate. A quick investigation revealed that the cellmate still had ties to what remained of Glenn's old network. "Take care of it," Aaron instructed Sam. "Create an accident. Nothing fatal, just a reminder." The next day, word came that Nina's parole had been denied. She would remain in prison for at least 5 more years. Aaron received a video of her reaction, a cold, steely look of defiance, a reminder that some threats needed to be managed constantly. As the empire grew, Aaron had learned how to balance his past ruthlessness with the wisdom of experience. The same skills that once served him in a quest for vengeance were now used to protect what he had built, a legacy of positive change. His network of allies and informants now safeguarded not only his family's interests, but also the communities they had invested in. Victoria's 10th birthday party gathered their extended family and close allies. Derek's son, who shared her interest in computer security, joined the celebration. Sam's twins demonstrated their martial arts moves, skills they'd learned as part of their protection training. The next generation of the Matthews inner circle was already taking shape. "Things have really changed," Casey said, watching the children play. Aaron nodded. "It's no longer just about power and appearances. Now it's about purpose." The community center, once just a building, had grown again, adding medical facilities and job training programs. The Matthews name, once tied to old money and subtle corruption, now stood for innovation, development, and community empowerment. But beneath the surface, Aaron's control was as sharp as ever. At the end of the night, Aaron received a final report. Nina's former cellmate had survived a car accident, one that would require months of rehabilitation. All traces of the cellmate's connection to Nina had been erased. The message was clear: some people never truly retire from their past. Later that night, Victoria came to Aaron's office with a program she had developed for the community center's new computer lab. It was a security system that flagged suspicious behavior and restricted access automatically. "It's impressive," Aaron said, studying her work. "Do you understand why security matters?" "Because what we build is worth protecting," Victoria replied, her voice full of confidence. "And because some people only understand strength," Aaron added, hugging her tightly. Aaron stood by the window that night, looking out over the city, a city that had been transformed under his leadership. What had once been a mission of revenge was now a testament to the power of security, wisdom, and purpose. Meredith came up behind him, wrapping her arms around him. "Still watching for enemies?" "Always," Aaron said, turning to face her. "But now we have so much more to protect, and better ways to protect it." The next morning, another report arrived. Another failed attempt by Nina to extend her influence from behind bars. Aaron reviewed the details, as methodical as ever. Some habits never changed. His empire had evolved, but the core values remained. Power, properly wielded, could build and protect. Justice, though, required constant vigilance. Victoria's legacy would be one of strength, wisdom, and protection, qualities that would secure the future of the Matthews family, just as Aaron had secured it for the next generation. The game would continue, with new players, but the Matthews legacy was safe, guided by hands that were both strong and wise.